Meanwhile, Eurydica calls out to Zephyr as the pitiful one. She cries as she saw the future that he walks. So he tells her that this time, he wants to win against the demon god, as if someone the likes of Eurydica helps him to help transplant the dragon heart into him. She apologizes as she cannot abide by that favor. She tells him that 1,000 years ago, the world was on the verge of collapse. The strongest of the 7 dragons, the black dragon Kaiserus, set the entire world aflame. Although Kaiserus was one of the 12 heroes that led the war against the demons, he lost his reason and went berserk due to the demon curse. The Archmage, Princess Eurydica, along with other strong individuals such as the Knight Georgius, and the Gold Dragon who stood on the side of humanity. The remaining 11 heroes had no choice but to face their old comrade Kaiserus to protect the world. After fighting desperately, the battle with the Black Dragon that went on for an entire year come to a close with a strike from the Knight Georgius. Zephyr reveals how the demon god, Tartarus, able to descend to the human world through summoning. And that's the entire reason for the demon god worshipper. Her goals in the past and his current goal are the same. Eurydica thoughts how they are so different. She wonders why Zephyr reminds her of Georgius. He says how proud he is. After Eurydica and the Gold Dragon spent 3 years purifying the dragon heart, and after so many mock transplant, he is finally ready to be the first dragon slayer, and will have the power to protect the world. Instead, the transplant failed, and the curse ate Georgius alive. It turns out that the Gold Dragon betrayed them, making it as it seems the curse has been lifted from the dragon heart. At this point, it is unknown what his motive are, but he claims that he had fun being on the humanity's side. However, he also has a duty that he must fulfill. Using a skill called Dragon Tongue, he commands Eurydica to keep her mouth shut for eternity. About the secret of the world that she learned about something else that's being censored. He says how unfortunate that they were too greedy for the dragon heart, adding that they could have spent their old days happily with their daughter if not for it. He also says that Eurydica's skill is quite marvelous, as the dragon heart was perfectly transplanted within Georgius's body, along with the demon curse hidden within. She fights him. She ripped out the dragon heart from his chest with her own hands, and then for 1,000 years, after purifying the curse, she was waiting for a suitable hero to pass on the dragon heart. She is already aware that Zephyr is worthy of it. However, his body is not ready to receive the dragon heart. If she transplant it into him now, his body will either be shattered into pieces or he will be crippled. He knows that, and intending to use the strong luck, which she also knew. She says that there is another moment for Zephyr to use strong luck in, as she tries to say it when Zephyr asks her. She got silenced by the power of the Gold Dragon who cursed her thousands years ago. She is enraged with it, as it already be thousands years yet he is still restricting her with Dragon Tongue. But she refused to back down and indirectly saying it. It will be when Zephyr must choose between the one he treasures most and someone else. However, she offers Zephyr after considering future risk, and after he has the transplant of the dragon heart now. He needs to hunt the other 4 dragons within a year. Well, with everything he knows now, a year is way too long to kill 4 dragons. He promised Eurydica that he will show her the safe world that she and Georgius wanted to see. He will accomplish it in half a year, so she can lay down her duty and watch over him in the afterlife. She cries as she apologizes. She decides to pass on the duty that she could not complete in her era over to Zephyr. She opens up her tomb to take up the dragon heart. Now she finally convinced to transplant the heart to Zephyr. As she takes up the dragon heart, she pays her respect to Zephyr's resolve, the new hero. So then she begins the process of the transplant. A few moments later, he finds himself in a dark place where he can't see anything. As he uses his mana to feel the surrounding, he knew that he felt something similar to that before. Something other than himself is in there. Suddenly a massive eye appears behind Zephyr. As Zephyr turns around, the thing attacks him immediately. He was Kaiserus, and he grabs Zephyr, enraged with the fact that Zephyr dares to covet his power. That is the evil desire of Kaiserus left within his dragon heart. He smells Zephyr up, and he can smell the gods on him. It turns out that he hates the gods to the bone, saying that Zephyr is the last person he would ever hand over his power to. And he just eats Zephyr up, shredding him to pieces. Meanwhile, Matthias massacres the Temple Knights. The Light Temple has nothing they possess that able to stand up against him. At last, the last 2 members that survived aside from Lucius are in Matthias' hands. Now, all that's left is Lucius. With the fire magic, Matthias bombards him. Fortunately, that same attack is no use against the overpriced shield he possesses. A moment later, he uses his light magic to counter, but it is still too slow as Matthias already dashed behind him. In an instant, he clawed Lucius's back twice, and Matthias knows that his reaction speed is noticeably slower, signify that he is extremely fatigued. The more time passes, the more acclimated Matthias is with the demonic power. Moreover, his recovery speed is ridiculous while Lucius keeps accumulating damage when they are exchanging blows. As Lucius swings his spear, Matthias grabs it, and from point-blank range, he summons his fire magic again. That blasts Lucius, smashing him into the wall. Right now, both Arno and Leona who have been giving him support are dead. He has no choice but to use his saint power. However, he knows that he might end up in a bigger trouble if he uses that power. On the other hand, Matthias wants to end their fight, when suddenly the fireball he summoned disappears. It surprised him that a feather coated with a light power penetrated his fireball and annihilated it. In the end, Lucius uses his saint power to summon his future self, as he asks Lucius with how much of Lucius's lifespan will he offer for summoning that power. Lucius offers 1 month of his life, but the power seems to want half a year worth of his life to defeat the demonification Matthias. So he accepts it. Lucius gets powered up with all of the light he will ever need to defeat a mere demonification. At that moment, Matthias, the demon, feels afraid of the power Lucius possesses, as he supposedly is no match for Matthias, yet, with a flick of Lucius's hand, he split open Matthias' chest. In the end, Lucius barrages him with the light's beam, decimating the demonification Matthias. Looking at his dying supposedly best friend, Lucius explained that it's a saint-exclusive skill called Glimpse of Glory. He borrows power from the angel that he become in the future in exchange for his lifespan. It's a closely guarded secret of the temple that only the power and portion of cardinals know. That is why average lifespan of a saint is around 30 years, because the temple always forced the saint into dangerous places for its own benefit. The position of saint is a brutal one, as they are nothing but jesters being played around by the temple. He then asks Matthias whether something like that, what he greeted over to the point that he betrayed his friend and abandoned everything. Matthias laughs, saying that Lucius was not the only jester in that matter. He adds that the only difference between them is that the goddess of light acknowledged Lucius, but not Matthias. In the end, Matthias dissipated into dust, as his hatred towards the goddess remains in his heart. The next thing Lucius does is to heal his dying priests. He is bumped with the fact that from all of the temple's party member, only the 3 of them is alive. He says that the raid is over and orders them to go back. Meanwhile, the effect of the strong luck helps Zephyr to fend off the dragon's attack. He expresses that there's no need for her to intervene just because he spaced out for a bit. He knows that he is inside of his own consciousness. It is not reality. What most important in there is his spirit. All he needs to do is to recall who he was. His future self from his last life. The armor and power he possesses are coming back to him, and in an instant he jumps off towards the dragon, punching Kaiserus's eyes as he summons his sword. He expresses how that is not the first time he has to fight the evil desire of a dragon, including the one in his previous life. Kaiserus's evil's desire is the 5th that he has to conquer. He expresses how annoying the dragons are, telling the Kaiserus if he is dead, he should just let himself be absorbed, adding that as the dragons go out of their way to test people to see if they are worthy of the dragon powers. With full confidence, he tells the dragon that he will beat the shit out of him, and do as Zephyr says. Kaiserus says that the only top-notch thing about Zephyr is his mouth, asking him to come. With full power, Zephyr faced the supposedly strongest dragon in the world. Meanwhile, Ned awakes as he is confused with what in the world is going on right now in front of his face. He sees Eurydica is busy with doing something to Zephyr, and he seems to be unconscious. He thinks that might be his chance to attack the boss, but as he tries to stand up, his body doesn't want to move because he experiences mana freezing. Eurydica tells him that he shouldn't get up yet, and suggesting him to get some rest. Before that, she also cast a magic on him that makes him throws up. It was the branded worm that he swallowed, and Eurydica commends him, knowing that the worm is in its larval state. Signify that Ned has never used the branded worm's power, and he managed to obtain that level of strength purely through hard work. As he's starting to lose conscious again, she tells him that he will recover after a long nap. 3 days later, somewhere else in the dungeon, Lucius, Arno and Leona is lost because the dungeon's layout had changed. Arno wants to leave the place immediately, but Lucius has another plan. He wants to look for the Stake of Faith, as he thinks that's the only way they can escape in time, knowing that the 2 slaves, Zephyr and Ned, were acting strange in the raid. Lucius assumes that they are different factions from the demon god cult, and they might be after the clearing rights to the dungeon. Now, he must find them and asks for the escape method. As they move toward the boss room, the guard knight welcomes them with his attacks. Lucius still manages to hold his ground, as the other 2 is wondering how can the Stake of Faith is inside the boss room while the gatekeeper is alive. Lucius is having a hard time dealing with the gatekeeper. He can only use Glimpse of Glory once a week, and he used it already against Matthias. He thought that it's finally his ends, as he feels afraid for not being able to see his family again. But suddenly Zephyr opens up the gate. He witnesses how Lucius pinned down by the massive gatekeeper. Zephyr expresses how perfect the timing is, and because he was being asked for a favor earlier, now he needs to help the saint. So he uses the dragon tongue magic, telling the gatekeeper to bow down. That in turn, smashing the gatekeeper's head into the ground, and surprise Lucius with what just happened in front of him. He is so surprised that the gatekeeper, the monster that he can't fight on his own, is obeying the person that he knows of as a slave. Now, Zephyr is counting down on how effective his dragon power is, and at the 10th second, the gatekeeper breaks free. He evades its attack as he knows that in order to prevent the dragon heart from going berserk due to imbalance between his power and the dragon's power, the dragon heart's capacity is restricted to 1%. Of course, even if there are restrictions, that is still the power of dragon. Though the gatekeeper pick up the sword, it's called Graham. It's a weapon made for the purpose of killing the strongest dragon. So it's a bad matchup for Zephyr, but he has his another power as well. The Sword of Light, given by the Goddess of Light. She lifted the restrictions on using the divine weapon with the request to save her saint, Lucius. With that, he summons the divine sword's power to kill the gatekeeper, as he's saying thank you to the formerly dragon slayer, Georgius, for his hard work keeping the peace. Lucius knows that what Zephyr has is the divine artifact of legends, that only a few chosen priests known of, the Sword of Light. Now he also knows that he was wrong, and Zephyr is not the demon god worshipper, rather he feels the Goddess of Light's presence from Zephyr. Not only that, Lucius also feels something similar to when he met the gold dragon, an undefiable pressure. As Zephyr turns around, Lucius and the temple's priests kneeling in front of him, greeting him as the Exalted One. It is explained that the battle between Zephyr and Kaiserus within his consciousness lasted 3 days. In the end, Kaiserus acknowledges his power, but that doesn't mean Kaiserus trusts him, so Kaiserus will continue to watch Zephyr from within. When he opened his eyes, Zephyr finds that Ned is unconscious and Eurydica had crumbled into ash. She also left a keepsakes for Zephyr, a crystal of magic, that he will have to give to Eurydica's descendant and master key. That will allow Zephyr to move around easily in the tomb. Lucius then removes the slave brand on Zephyr and Ned. With that, Zephyr also asks Lucius to take care of the debts as well, and of course Lucius is more than willing to do so. Now he also offers to help Zephyr more as currently he thoughts that Zephyr is on their side, while Ned is thinking that it won't be too bad to be able to join arms with the saint, as he knows himself that Saint Lucius is the ultimate weapon raised by the temple through the money they plunder from people like Ned. Lucius is simply someone that Ned cannot bring himself to have good feelings for. For now, he thinks that he will use anything he can, as well as Zephyr. Then, Lucius thinks that it's not a good place to talk, and offer them to go back first, but Zephyr reveals that their dogfight only just began. He informs that the third parish of the Temple of Light must already have become a nest of demon god worshippers by now, due to the forces that the demon god worshipper Cardinal Aldean brought, and the twin knights, 2 of the strongest in the continent. Even with Zephyr, who obtained the dragon heart, his strength is still constrained, so they need an ample preparation. Especially against Aldean, the situation won't simply resolve with just a battle. Zephyr then takes out the master key. He changes the layout of the dungeon to reveal the treasure room. He offers them to gear up first, as Eurydica's treasure room that no one has able to enter for 1,000 years. Inside, there are so many treasure that able to fill up a country, even high-grade treasures that protected inside a crystal barrier. Even though they don't know how to take out the treasure, Zephyr simply takes them out with the master key. Zephyr also finds an elixir that able to help them to identify the demon god worshippers. That makes him happy as things are starting to work out in his favor. Not only that, the party of 5 also get geared up as well, with them taking equipment that suits themselves best. While Ned, one supposedly Zephyr's teacher, taking a crow cape, dusk tunic, mist bracelet, and sword of mirage, while Zephyr takes Graham for himself, and dragon set armor that makes him also fully geared up. Now, they discuss the plan to take Aldean, where the tricky things to deal with is that Aldean is a high-ranked noble and all Lucius knows is that they don't have a way to identify the demon god worshippers. That's when Zephyr reveals the vial to the party, as long as Lucius able to identify them as the saint, the son of the goddess of the light. People will listen to him. Meanwhile, Alfonso gets controlled by Aldea, and it's true that he is already succeeding in taking over the parish temple. Lucius's wife, Claudia, and their kid can only watch as she only knows that Aldean is a priest and wonders why would he do something like that. Aldean asks whether she thinks that he had showed her something amusing, Not only that, he also explains that his branded worm is different from the others. As he takes it out, his branded worm has a special ability called Hive, which already evolved into a queen, and able to give birth to larvae that allows him to brainwash and control any human who ingests it, just like the Reverend in front of him. And with that, he asks her to persuade Lucius, yet as she asks him what she needs to persuade Lucius for, that makes her kid cry. His name is Marius, and Aldean intends to use his hive to him, saying that it's little bug friend as a present for him. But Claudia fends his hand off, throwing the bugs away from the kid. That also reveals the other bugs that make off Aldean's body. As he gets enraged with her, a knight arrives reporting that there's a trouble in the temple, adding that Lucius is outside. Aldean is surprised to learn that Lucius is back that soon, so he looks outside. What he witnesses is a lot of his knights get knocked out flat by the trio, Lucius, Arno, and Leona. He greets him, as it's been a while after they meet, and Aldean is shouting why would a saint attack the priests of his own parish. Right now, Lucius is already using the potion of scrutiny, and when he add a drop of that on his eyes, he will be able to see the branded worms within the demon god worshipper's body. Witnessing how powerful Aldean Worm is, the Saint of Light, Lucius proclaims to arrest Aldean for acts of heresy, adding that the sins of deceiving the Temple of Light is a heavy weight to bear, and telling Aldean that now he will pay for it. That enrages him, laughing and calling the saint as impertinent brat. Alfonso appears. As of now, he is controlled by Aldean, asking whether Lucius has evidence to accuse the cardinal of heresy, which of course Lucius notices that in his uncle's body is not a branded worm, but Aldean's ability that Zephyr spoke of. But Zephyr prohibits to reveals the potions of scrutiny, as it will stir a lot of trouble that might get Lucius killed, and he suggests to get surefire evidence. Eureka Tombs is a great labyrinth that covers an extremely wide underground area. That range actually extends as far as directly underneath the third parish temple. And if they move to the right location and dig through the ground to get outside, they will arrive at the base that Matthias used, where the demon god worshippers held their assemblies. That's when they found the evidence in the abandoned mansion, and that's what Lucius bring to arrest Aldean. That's are the letters that Aldet exchanged with Matthias, his plot to seize the dragon heart, and his acts of worship to the demon god. All are recorded in those letters, though there are instruction to burn immediately after reading. It seems that Matthias hold on to them in the case that he would get betrayed. In the end, Aldean laughs knowing that Lucius that thorough with investigating him, or whether Matthias feels some sort of fidelity toward Lucius and blurt out everything. He then reveals it, as the executive of the demon cult, rank 11 of the demon god worshippers, Aldean. But for now, Lucius still unable to do anything as he also has Claudia and their kid hostage. And he asks Lucius whether he would ingest the special worm Aldean has, with powerful brainwashed ability, or Claudia should. Without hesitation, Lucius offers to eat it and tells him not to lay a hand on her and his kid. But in the end, Aldean decides to feed it to Claudia anyway, where suddenly Ned appears, stabs him from behind. It turns out that the mist bracelet able to hide his presence, that makes the twin knight fails to detect him. In turn, his sword of mirage able to hurt Aldean. His first priority is to save the kid and Claudia, so Ned grabs her intending to take her away. But the gold knight stood in his way, as if at that moment is his first time facing the older of the twin knights, and he is incredible because he possesses the power of one of the continent's 10 strongest. To cover for Ned, Lucius uses his spear to distract Aldean and his knights, that leaving the gold knight no choice but to defend his lord. That makes an opening for Ned to take on the silver knight, and for Claudia to snatch back her kid. Now Aldean is confused whether the eastern one deceived him, to ruin his plan and him into a corner by pretending to cooperate. And all he thinks now is to get away, as he lost his hostage, and if Lucius uses his glimpse of glory, he can easily kill Aldean. The gold knight gets down from the tower, preparing to face the saint as the silver knight is helping Aldean to run away. It is then revealed that he is Castor, rank 20 of the demon god worshipper, will go face to face with Lucius, the first son of light. From all over the town, the people is prohibited from entering, because the knights is in the middle of training. Even the mining slave are able to see the smokes that comes out from the temple from afar. Arno and Leona goes against the lower rank knights and priests that swarming into their way. But with their newly attained equipment, they are able to hold their ground quite well, while the saint and the gold knights wreaking havoc in the temple, breaking buildings one after another. Therefore, Lucius is the one that has the upper hand. Castor thoughts on how annoying it is that he has to deal with Lucius' spear, because in a face-off between a sword and a lance is fundamentally more advantageous since it can be used to attack with long range. But it's different with him as he is the 10th strongest knight in the continent. He evades the lance's tip and goes to cut the saint up. Castor doesn't expect it that Lucius wears a mirror chainmail, which reflects 50% of the damage he received. Lucius counterattacks him as he expresses that he, the saint, let the twin knight to rose on the rank within the continent, while he barrages Castor with trusses from his extremely overpriced spear, because a divine being such as himself cannot dare to be placed in the rankings of mere humans, as he pushes the gold knight into a corner. In the end, Lucius uses a light magic called Judgment, making a massive hole on Castor's stomach. As the saint lands down, Leona cheers up, calling out to him, thinking that he manages to beat the gold knight. But he yells to them not to come closer, as his stomach also get hurt, because as he uses his judgment, he received total 7 attacks. Castor heals up with the worm's ability, saying that he also has reflection ability that reflected around 50 to 60% of the damage from judgment. He claims that he was planning to hold Lucius off until Aldian manages to escape. But now he is enraged and decides to kill Lucius. He dashes toward the saint, instantly appears behind Lucius. Now, the saint fails to react to the attack, and Castor also uses his maximum power with the help of the worm in his body, shouting that he will send Lucius to his goddess right away. But suddenly, Aldian sent message to Castor, asking him to come to Aldian right away. As he got distracted with the message, Lucius uses Chain Fail and Paralyze, that make him unable to evade anymore. Lucius then uses another judgment to him, seemingly that the saint doesn't care about the reflected damage he might receive after. Somewhere else, it turns out that Zephyr intercepts Aldian escape route while all of chaos that happened in the parish temple. Zephyr tells him to get up, as his beating is not over yet. And that's when Lucius reveals to the Gold Knight that his job was to keep Castor occupied from the start to kill the 3 of Aldian, the Silver, and the Gold Knights, one by one after separating them. Lucius mocks him, saying that he sure fell into their trap quite marvelously. That makes the Gold Knight so enraged to him, that looks like his vein is going to burst open. Back at the demon god worshipper castle, Aldian asks to transport the dragon heart with his ability. He can control the 3rd parish temple and possess the saint. So, the leader allows him to, yet Aldian can only wondering why it turns out this way. He already planned for every situation, but he fails to count for the Easter One's betrayal. He previously said that he will eliminate his disciple, but in the end, Aldian was left running away from the temple. Then, both Aldian and the Silver Knight arrive at their getaway carriage, as what concerns Aldian the most is his scale of his enemies. If the Eastern One betrayed him, then he doesn't know how many more Dragon King-style disciples are in hiding. As he goes into the carriage, he touches a green and sticky substance. In an instant, pain spread throughout his body as he screams his lungs out. He knows it was poison, one that hurt like hell. It turns out that Zephyr disguised himself as the temple's priest. Aldian tries to ask who the hell he is, but Zephyr kicked the high noble priest in the face, telling him to shut up. The Silver Knight is quite slow-witted, telling Zephyr to surrender. So, Zephyr throws a poison needle into the Silver Knight's face, saying how shabby the Knight are, adding that Aldian should bring around the real Silver Knight with him instead of a fake who dies from a single poison needle. So Aldian tries to call him out, Pollux, the real Silver Knight. But Zephyr already beheaded the Silver Knight that stays on guard. As 12 hours ago, the trio, Zephyr, Ned and Lucius gang up on the Silver Knight, where Lucius feels skeptical at first, but it turns out that the Potion of Scrutiny can really distinguish demon god worshippers. The original plan is that Ned will hand over the dragon heart that he stole, which his master explains. There will be a temple priest among them, telling Ned to lay low after getting the slave's brand removed. But the priest and his master plans to use the slave brand to restrain Ned and plan to kill him. Now Ned knows, while Zephyr knows it from his past life, where he also knows that Lucius, who was controlled by the worm, was a nightmarish enemy. However many times he recall it, what he remembers is the horror when Lucius's wife begs Zephyr to kill her. With all of the dragon heart's power he can muster, he summons a lightning that envelope his sword, striking into Aldian. But he realizes that there's not enough volume for a person to disintegrate. Suddenly, there's an attack coming to Zephyr's way as he blocks it with his sword. The attack comes from Aldian, who releases his demonification form, as he claims that even though he is stronger than the Twin Knights, he chooses not to fight because he doesn't want to show that form to anyone. Zephyr knows that Aldian segregated a part of himself as the lightning fell and returned to his true form. In that state, the poison must have already been removed. It turns out that Aldian originally demonificated already and gained the mimicry skill that allows him to mimic human appearance. With that, he gathers all of his strength into his hand, and he stomps the ground with it. The impact destroys the forest hundreds of yards away. Though, Ned and Claudia notices that the battle between Zephyr and Aldian already begun. so Ned tells her to hide with her kid while he goes to back Zephyr up. He tells her to not come out until he says so, while giving her the bracelets that able to hide their presence. Then he goes, leaving both of them in the cave. As Ned went towards the battle, he thoughts how he has waited for that day, the day to take his revenge against the beasts, who killed his father and took their family heirloom. One is already dead, only 2 remains, and Ned is determined to send them all to hell. Meanwhile, at the temple, the Gold Knight is using his branded worm's power. His attack power has gotten significantly higher, but the sharpness of his attack has reduced. The amount of effective blows he's landing on the saint is decreasing. Lucius calls out to Arno, as he immediately uses the highest grade support skill there is, called the Light on the battlefield. Not only that, even the spirit can also receive the buffs. Shooting Start then goes to the Gold Knight, as Leona's chain of light follow suits behind the spirit. Though, that kind of slow attacks are not effective against the Gold Knight, but once Shooting Star's magic debuff him, slowing him after a direct contact. The next person that comes is Lucius. With his overpriced spear he thrusts toward the Gold Knight with no mercy. Even the knight tries to counter it. The attack fails to find its target and misses Lucius. Though the strikes went to the building and it was the Gold Knight plan all along. He wasn't aiming for Lucius but the building, so the rumble will goes to the brainwashed priests below and Lucius's uncle. Then, the Gold Knight manages to run away from the temple. At this point, the saint already destroys 1/3 of the worms in the knight's body as he runs towards where his master calling him. He is so loyal to Aldian because his lord gave both the twin knights new meaning to their life. But, as he dashing around in the tree, a mana strike appeared from below, striking the Gold Knight in half. It was Ned, with the Mirage Sword, which allows him to hurt the demonification worm inside the Gold Knight's body. Laying down on the ground, Castor is pissed with the fact that Ned keeps getting in his way. That's when Ned reminds the Gold Knight that he is the one who killed Ned's father. In turns, Castor mocks him, saying how can he remembers the names of hundreds of people he killed. As he finishes recovering with the power of the worm, he took off his armor, saying that he will let Ned lives if he stay away from the Knight's way now. As he counts to 10, he thinks that the temple's party must not be confident enough to defeat him head-on. That's when Ned reveals that he has the other twin sword, the moon sword that the Silver Knights wields. As Ned says that what Castor's brother last words to his face. That of course pissing him off so much, and Ned's plan to hold off the Gold Knight is working. Meanwhile, the strike that destroyed the forest doesn't really hurt Zephyr. They trade blows one after another. With the Dragon Slayer armor set, Zephyr is able to defend against the powerful punch from the demonification Aldian. In return, with Graham in hand, the Dragon Slayer sword, Zephyr counters the attacks with his Dragon King-style swordsmanship. Though, Aldian is able to concentrate the mana not only to change forms, he can even recreate the sharpness of metal and monsters' hard thick hide. He also able to mimic insects' digestive fluid, lava-like substance and spreading it around him, aiming it towards Zephyr. After evading it, with the Cloud Dragon Ascension Zephyr slashes Aldian into pieces, a sword technique that focused on speed and accuracy. That doesn't stop Aldian's attack, as one of the tentacles spews more digestive fluid, but Zephyr is able to tank it with the set armor. Next, Aldian's body pieces turn into various weapons that surround Zephyr immediately, and in that instant, he sent barrages of attacks towards the Dragon Slayer. His other name is Immortal Aldian and he claims that no matter how much a mere human cuts him, he will keep regenerating. As he finishes, he grips his hand, focusing the mana he has into his hand saying that he will only half kill Zephyr, and will put an insect in him that will make him Aldian's subordinate instead of the saint. And he punches Zephyr, blasting him away towards a boulder and disintegrate it. Aldian doesn't stop there though. He jumps up in the air with the mana gathered in both of his hand. He turns it into a double sword and strike them towards Zephyr. Right after that, he combined both of the sword into one, making it a bigger sword. Aldian also coat it with the mana he possesses and with the help from the branded worm. Then he strikes it, making a massive explosion in the area. With it, also appear a blinding light in the collision. But he doesn't know that Zephyr is a Dragon Slayer, even with 1% output of his Dragon Heart. He manages to stop the sword's strike with only his fingers. There where he reveals it, that Aldian and his twin knights are too easy for Zephyr to deal with. But he wants to reward Ned, giving him the chance to satisfy his revenge. And secondly, at this moment demons are rare, so Zephyr wants to test his Dragon Heart. As he release it, the 1% output of the power from the Dragon Heart, and his eyes turned red and dragon scales appeared on his skin. Zephyr then says that the data he might gain from battling demons is especially valuable, and Immortal like Aldian is perfect to be the punching bag. He is going to test a few things, as he asks Aldian to endure it as best as he can, while Zephyr giving off such an intense pressure that makes Aldian shivers. In the end, he flies trying to run away, thinking that he doesn't want to die, not in a place like that. But with the dragon power, Zephyr claws Aldian mid-flight, bringing him down. As the demons fells, Zephyr tells him to get up, adding that he still have more to test out, and he won't let the demon die easily. Somewhere else, Castor is able to pin Ned down in their battle. In the end, Ned is about to lose against the Gold Knight of Aldians. Though, before the battle, Zephyr explained on how to defeat the Gold Knights to Ned. Originally, 25 years ago, both of the Gold and Silver Knights are a noble with promising futures. But Aldian, who took notice of them, interfered with the Vigo Count family's succession and made the Twin Knights his subordinates. And to them, he bestowed the Sun Sword and Moon Sword that resonate with each other to maximize their unique constitutions. The Twin Knights' notorious skills, perfected through the Sun Sword and Moon Sword. Once he attacks, there inevitably forms a gap in his movements before he moves on to his next stance. It's a weakness that everyone has. But the Silver Knight's attacks as if making up for the Gold Knight's gap. These technique called Eclipse, they transcend their own limits of accuracy and speed to unleash a storm of blades that slaughters the enemy without a single gap. That's where Ned comes, to recreate Eclipse by resonating with the Gold Knight through the Moon Sword and use it against the Gold Knight. That surprised Castor, as he never told anyone but Aldian about the secret of the eclipse. But how does Ned knows about it? While at the same time, Aldian's screams were once again echoing in Castor's head, but he did not listen. And just as planned, after Ned shows him the Silver Knight's sword and technique, Castor won't be able to ignore Ned, no matter how worried he is about Aldian. So that is precisely why Ned has to kill Castor now, because there won't be any other chances than that. They trade blows again, Ned with his vengeance, and the same thing could be said with Castor. A few moments later, Castor split Ned in half, only to realize that it's a trick by the power of Ned's cape. That instant, Ned appears behind Castor with his Dragon King style ready on his left palm to immobilize him. Now Ned manages to stop Castor's movement, and his chances arrive. He strikes the Moon Sword toward Castor, but the Sun Sword moves on its own even though Castor has been stunned. That what's Ned doesn't know, the two swords are drawn toward each other, and with that Castor able to finally land an attack to Ned with his hand. And that is how he is able to pin Ned down on the ground, wishing with every fiber of his being to kill Ned. Though, Ned punches the Sun Sword and starts performing his Dragon King style to the fullest. He burned Castor's eyes with the electric energy. On top of that, Ned also blends his presence with the power of the Crow Cape, making Castor has a hard time dealing with him now. And with Moon Sword, Ned summons a massive lightning and strikes it towards the Gold Knight. And at this point, one of the spots in the continent's strongest 10 that the Twin Knights, the Vigo brothers, held, had become vacant, while Ned finally able to satisfy his anger towards the people that took his life before.